Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever in the world you're joining us from. My name is Jesse Gebhardt. I'm a principal specialist for QuickSight, and I'll be leading us through our talk today around BI at Hyperscale. So here's our agenda of what we're going to cover today. So we'll start off with an overview as well as a demo of QuickSight, so we'll be able to see it in action. We'll then move on to how QuickSight integrates with AWS and all of the data sources that you might have within AWS. And QuickSight does connect to lots of non-AWS sources as well, but we'll highlight some very common use cases where we're using QuickSight together with your AWS data. Next, we'll move on to how do I deploy QuickSight at scale? How do I manage users at scale? How do I do security and governance at scale? And then lastly, we'll go into the pricing of QuickSight and how that works for both small use cases up to really, really large use cases in the hundreds of thousands of users. So lots to cover today. With that, let's jump in. So starting off with just what are some of the existing challenges that you have with BI platforms that you might already be using today or may be evaluating? So the first is that the pricing can be restrictive. So this is a big reason why our customers look at QuickSight. I'll go into pricing a little bit later. But what we find with our customers is that with the tools that they're using today, they oftentimes don't even roll them out to the full audience because the licensing is either per user and they have this really long tail of users who maybe don't need to be in there every day, but need access to these reports, but they need to license them just the same as they would license someone who's in there all day, every day. Or you're maybe licensing it by server, where you need to scale and compute basically the total capacity that you would need to support your peak amount of users. But then oftentimes you're overpaying for that because you're not always at your peak. So just generally what we see is that all the users that actually need reporting and dashboards and BI don't actually get licenses for it just because it's so restrictive. The next is that it's hard to scale these systems, right? Whether they're on premises or whether you're hosting them in a cloud, you need to do that capacity planning. You need to figure out when you need to add more nodes. You need to reconfigure those nodes depending on the type of load that you have. They don't necessarily integrate as well with data in the cloud and on premises. So you wind up having to either export data from certain sources and push it to other areas where the tool can access it, or putting public endpoints and opening things up to the public internet for your BI tool to access it. So it just generally doesn't integrate well, not only with your data, but with other systems, perhaps like single sign-on and so on. It's also resource intensive to keep these systems running, right? Not only do you need to do that capacity planning, but it takes time to scale that system out. It takes time to maintain and upgrade and plan for those upgrades, configure things like high availability. So there is a lot of overhead in just maintaining these systems. And then lastly, generally they lack some advanced features such as machine learning that are built directly into them. So here's some of the reasons what makes QuickSight different from other tools out there in the market. So first is that we offer a pay-as-you-go pricing model, which is unique within the BI industry. So we'll go again into pricing a little bit later, but this allows you to start small, scale up to really large user bases, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, and only pay for how much those users are actually accessing the system. The second is that QuickSight's architecture is fully managed by AWS. So there's nothing that you need to do in terms of provisioning servers or managing high availability or doing that capacity planning at all initially. AWS manages this entire service for you. So you can scale, you could have 10 users on there today, add thousands of users overnight, and not have to configure a single thing within QuickSight. Being an AWS service, you might expect that we have pretty tight integration with the rest of AWS, and we certainly do. So primarily from a data perspective is what we're talking about here. So whether you have data sources that are sitting within a VPC, QuickSight has private connectivity into any sources in your VPC. Also allows us to get private connectivity to your on-premise sources as well. If you have data in S3 and you're building a data lake out on S3, QuickSight has by far the tightest integration with any data that you have in S3. So any permissions that you've set, like bucket level permissions via IAM, or if you're using services like Lake Formation to manage those permissions centrally, QuickSight natively integrates with all of that. So you're not replicating or bypassing any security that you already have. We offer extensive API support for QuickSight. So one main thing that this enables is to embed these into your applications. Whether those applications might be external facing or internal facing. Very common use cases for our customers to embed QuickSight into their own portals and applications. And what comes along with that is not only embedding it, but I may want to manage my users programmatically. I might want to manage my content programmatically. Perhaps I need to move things from a dev to a test to a prod environment. And we offer a really rich set of APIs to automatically manage and deploy assets within QuickSight as well. And then lastly, around machine learning. So we have a number of pretty powerful machine learning capabilities that are built directly into QuickSight. So with zero coding, no knowledge of having to write these models, any business user can use things like anomaly detection and forecasting right out of the box. And then for more sophisticated use cases, if you have created custom models in our ML suite for Amazon SageMaker, you can reference those models through QuickSight and kind of enrich your data sets so that you can use the results of that in your visualizations as well. So it allows you to bring your own predictive models and visualize them. So at a high level, these are kind of the main points of why our customers choose QuickSight over others out there. So what are we using QuickSight for? Really, the idea is that we're making dashboards, right? We're going to make them really interactive, plenty of drill down, drill across from one report to another. They're accessible on any device. So QuickSight is a purely web-based service. There's no desktop software, even on the creation side of it. So this allows you to view it on any web browser, even on mobile devices. We have native applications for iOS and Android that you can download for free. And just a little bit in our terminology, we call everything a dashboard, whether it looks more like a text report or whether it has a lot of visualization in it. So we have lots of customers that use QuickSight just for kind of traditional text reporting as well. But just a quick note, if I use the term dashboard, I mean covering kind of both of those. But generally, that's the idea. We're creating visualizations and dashboards. While you can certainly consume them via your browser or your mobile devices, like I mentioned, we also support email reports. So you can schedule these to be delivered, say, on a weekly basis. Every Monday morning, send this group of users a snapshot of this report, or every single morning. You control the schedules on this. One important piece of it is that this does support row-level security, which is something that we'll talk about later. But just at a high level, this means that I could have one dashboard configured such that everybody sees different data when they get there. And then the email reports also respect that same security. So when I send an email report out to all 1,000 users that have access to this, and they should all see different data, the same thing will happen in their emails. They'll get a customized slice of that data delivered in their email version. So ML Insights, I talked about this briefly, but we'll see a lot of this through the demo. The baked-in ML power features would be primarily the anomaly detection and the forecasting capabilities. As I briefly mentioned, you can integrate with Amazon SageMaker and bring your own custom models. And generally, the way to display a lot of this information is through what we call narratives and insights. So you can see some of these on the screenshot here, but I'll show you in the demo how these work and how you can create them from scratch as well. And then lastly, you can embed these into either external facing applications or internal facing applications. Today we'll focus a little bit more on the internal facing use cases. We've got a great tech talk that we delivered a couple months ago specifically all about embedding. So if embedding is a major part of your use case, I highly encourage you to go check out our previous tech talk as well. So how does QuickSight work? So this is a really simple view at just behind the scenes, kind of what the, not necessarily the architecture, but how does the flow look like? So in this case, we're depicting Redshift as my data source. We support lots of data sources, but kind of picture your data source there on the left. And then in QuickSight, we have two major types of users. We have folks we call authors who are creating all the data sets and creating the dashboards, and they're sharing those with readers, and those readers are consumers of the dashboards. A really key part of QuickSight that enables us to scale is Spice. So Spice stands for the Super Fast Parallel In-Memory Calculation Engine, which is quite a mouthful. I don't expect you to remember that acronym, but that's why we call it Spice for short. The whole idea with Spice is that you get very fast performance when you import your data into Spice. So it's an in-memory engine that's just built directly into QuickSight. It's not like a separate AWS service or separate add-on or anything like that. It's just part of QuickSight. And particularly the architecture around Spice allows us to spin up replicas of data sets extremely quickly. So it's perfect for high concurrency use cases. The performance that you get with just one user looking at that dashboard is exactly the same performance you should expect if you had many thousands looking at it all at the same time. So again, this is all managed by AWS. It's nothing you should have to worry about, but you can be confident that your users will always get consistent performance if you import your data into Spice. So just a couple quick technical details around Spice. The reasons why I wouldn't use it, one is that there's a certain data set size that Spice supports. So that's 250 million rows per data set. You can use as many data sets as you want in each of your dashboards, but each of those can be up to 250 million rows. So if I have data bigger than that, say in the billions of rows, then we'll just leverage our direct query capabilities. So with any of the sources that you connect to in QuickSight, while you can import into Spice, you can also query those sources directly. So dataset size being one of them, and the other being the refresh frequency. So Spice can be refreshed up to every hour today, or at a higher level, you can do daily or weekly or monthly if you'd like, but hourly would be the most frequent. But if you need data more fresh than every hour, then again, we can leverage our direct connectivity. And we'll talk about even some new exciting use cases around real-time analytics that we just launched within the last month. So just before we jump to our demo, just a quick highlight of some of the new features that we've launched in the last 12 months. So QuickSight, we're coming up on 4 years since being publicly available. Tremendous progress on the feature set within those 4 years, and particularly within the last 12 months, we've really seen the service evolve quite a bit. This is not nearly an exhaustive list of what happened in the last 12 months. It'd probably be 70, 80 features long, but it definitely includes some of the highlights. And we won't go through every single one of these, but you can see some pretty big additional capabilities, such as the whole ML Insights feature set, the ability to create folders and set permissions on those folders. We're going to deep dive on that later and how that helps us with governance. Real-time capabilities, column level security, the integration with SageMaker, joining across different data sources. Right, really all aspects of the product have seen quite a bit of evolution. And even between now and reInvent, which is only about a month away, you're going to see another 30 or 40 features just in the next 4 weeks or so. So really active development on QuickSight. We do new releases every 2 weeks, and you should see between 2 and 5, sometimes more features in each one of those releases. Well, with that, we'll jump to a demo. So here I'm showing you an example of what a dashboard could look like in QuickSight. So for our demo, first we'll start with what does that reader experience look and feel like? what are my end users going to be able to do once they get to these dashboards? And then we'll also quickly run through some of the administrative capabilities and how do I manage this at scale. And then we'll do also a quick example of how do I build something like this from scratch, so you can get a feel for what the authoring experience feels like as well. But first, we'll start here on an example dashboard. So all the traditional ways of filtering that you are used to, of course, are supported here. So anything just like drop-down menus and slider bars and date pickers, consider those a given. You can add as many of those types of filters as you'd like. There's also more selection-based filtering. So for instance, like if I were to click on one of these particular slices, everything on my dashboard is going to update to, in this case, just retail, just the slice that I'd selected there. So all my KPIs have updated, my performance here, even my insights have updated, as well as my forecast. So this is showing us a little bit of some of the ML capabilities. This lighter orange part of my line is the forecasted values. And these are what we call insights. So just kind of think of them as another visual type in QuickSight, just like there's bar charts and line charts. Insights are just another way to present data to your users. And we find that they really resonate well with folks who are a little less data savvy. So just kind of spelling it out in English, and you can also customize these and write them in any language you'd like. But notice that they do respond to the filters just like any of the other visuals do. So even my forecasts and my month-over-month changes and my top customers, all that updates with any kind of filter selections. You can drill into visuals as well. So hierarchical drill paths are really easy to set up. So for instance, if I drill into tech and then I drill into a particular customer, you can build whatever drill paths you'd like into these visuals. And you can even drill from one visual to another. So if I select one of my cities here, sorry, let me try and grab a bigger one here. So here I'm drilling from one tab to another, or this could be at an entirely different dashboard if you want it to. But I clicked on Seattle, so now notice that my text report here, which is showing my raw row level information, is now filtered to Seattle as well. So last thing to highlight just on the end user side would be some of the anomaly detection capabilities. So this, I would argue, is probably the most sophisticated type of built-in analytics that we offer, not only through the ML Insights, but just in QuickSight in general, where you can ask QuickSight to scan your data at a periodic interval and ask it to monitor a certain set of metrics across any kind of sets of dimensions you have in your data. So for instance, here I've been asking it to monitor my sales across all my different customers and let me know if something is higher than expected. I can't configure QuickSight to send me alerts on these. So this would, when it does find new anomalies, it'll send them directly to my email. And it will show them here in the dashboards as we see right now. Now, getting notified of anomalies is nice, but the most powerful part about this is here where you can say explore the anomalies. So here it opens what we call contribution analysis. So for these two anomalies that it had found, where in this case Amazon.com had jumped up from 2K to 89, it is now splitting that by other fields from my data so I can see what actually drove that change. So I can see from a city perspective, it was all out of Seattle. From a product perspective, here's my top products that kind of drove that change. And this is what I'd pre-configured it to scan, but I could actually change that on the fly even. So I could say, let's add also our segmentation into that and potentially our categories, just as some examples. So now you can see based on those other fields that I had added, that is mostly for SMB and mostly for aluminum category, right? But the idea with this is no matter which anomaly you select, you'll be able to see the drivers behind that. And this contribution analysis information also makes it to the email reports. So when you get these notifications via your email, it will include all of this pre-configured anomaly detection as well. So there's just a brief walkthrough of just what a dashboard could look like and what some of the interactivity is like. Sorry, just before we move on, just a quick note on exporting capabilities. So on any visual, you'll be able to export data to a CSV, particularly for things like tables and pivot tables. You'll also have the additional option to export it to Excel. And then the print button up here would allow you to export things to PDF as well. And then lastly, if I do want to set up those email reports, here under the share button is where I'm going to find the email reporting capabilities. So here's where I would set up the schedule of how often I want this to be sent out. And I can control some information around the email, like what should the subject be? Do I want to put more text into the body of the email? And then who should receive that email? So anyone who is a user of QuickSight and who has access to that dashboard is eligible to receive this as an email version as well. All right, so at this point, we'll pivot a little bit to some of the administrative capabilities. So I'm logged in here as an admin on this QuickSight account. Everything I had shown you to this point is something that the readers would be able to do, but this Manage QuickSight button here is available just for your admin users. So here's generally where I'm going to manage my user base. I can invite users directly to QuickSight, but I can also federate them in from other single sign-on platforms, from IAM. You can also hook QuickSight up with Active Directory. So lots of ways to get the users to QuickSight. But here is generally my management console. Here's where if you want to purchase annual subscriptions rather than going month to month, where you would manage those subscriptions, where you're going to manage your overall Spice capacity for the account. So just generally with the Spice capacity, as you add authors to your account, each of those authors will add 10 gigs of Spice capacity to your total account, kind of like a pooled set of resources. So most of our customers, just the 10 gigs per user that get added is plenty for them. But if you do need to purchase additional Spice capacity, you can do so here. So in our Enterprise Edition, which is what I recommend using, it's 38 cents per gig per month. So it's not a huge driver of the cost, but you can additionally add more capacity if you'd like. Just generally some account settings, like what should the notification email address be? Here's where I'm going to configure what AWS sources that this account should have access to. And I can even scope it down to, using IAM to say, maybe this certain set of users only has access to these buckets in S3, whereas others have access to different buckets. Right? So from high level to really granular security on your data sources themselves. Configuring VPC connections. I won't go through every single one of these, but generally here's where your administrators are going to set those kind of account level type settings. And then for the final part of the demo, I'll walk you through, how do we create one of those dashboards from scratch? How do we connect to data? Generally, what does that authoring experience look like? So here, I'm going to start with a new analysis. So in our terms, an analysis is whenever I'm creating something new or it's a work in progress before I publish a dashboard from it, or maybe it's just an ad hoc analysis that I never publish a dashboard from. But in any case, whenever I'm starting something new, I'll start with an analysis. And here I can see any of my existing data sources that either maybe I created these or maybe someone else created them and they shared them with me. But nonetheless, these are existing ones that I have access to. But if I want to make a new data set, I can do so from here. So here's all the sources that QuickSight supports today. So everything from just uploading flat files to importing data from S3, or using other engines like Athena to query my data in S3, which is a really popular a popular data source for QuickSight. Redshift, right, RDS, lots of non-AWS sources like Oracle and SQL Server and Teradata and Snowflake, even some SaaS connectors, some real-time connectors such as Elasticsearch and TimeStream that were just recently launched. But in any case, this list is constantly growing, but here's where I'm going to choose the source that I'd like to use. So in my example, I'll use Redshift. and just authenticate to my instance. Next, I can select my schema that I want to start with, and I'll see any tables and views that are found in that schema. And I can start with one of these and join a bunch of tables together to create like a star schema. I could use custom SQL instead if I just want to paste something in that's already ready to go. And then you have this optional data prep experience. So if you just need one table or a view, you can just kind of select it and move on. But if you do want to join tables or enrich the data set by adding calculated columns, or add descriptions and add more metadata like column descriptions or even folders of my fields, changing data types, renaming columns, right? Anything around data prep is what's going to happen on the screen here. So for instance, maybe I just want to join some dimension tables to my fact table. This is one example. So here's how I would configure an example of a join. So here's my join key. Here's the type of join that I want to apply. And now I have the result of these two tables, shown in my preview window down here. So not only can you join tables from the same source, but you can even add data from multiple different sources and combine them together into a single data set. So notice up here, I can say, I want to switch the data source, and maybe I want to go grab some data from S3 or from Salesforce or join any of the sources we saw on the previous screen. You can join together into a single data set, or just upload a file and join an Excel file to the source. So lots of different flexibility in terms of data mashup. So I'm going to simplify this and just go back to one table, which kind of has all my data pre-joined and flattened out, which is this orders table. And the last thing I'll point out here is here's what I'm going to choose. Do I want to import this data into Spice or query it directly? You can always change this later on. This is it's not something that you're locked into. So I'll choose to import this data into Spice. And I'm sorry, I told you that was the last thing, but one thing after that is that if I do want to integrate with SageMaker to enrich my data set with some of those other predictive models that I've already created, this is where I would do so. So I would select the model that I want to apply. I'd upload a schema file, which is going to determine, what are the input columns to this, what do the output columns look like. But at the end of the day, it's essentially going to add additional columns to the data set, kind of like calculated fields would, but those additional columns would have come from the result of my model that I'd created in SageMaker. All right, so so say I'm happy with my data set here. I'm going to say I want to now move on and save and visualize this. So I did choose to import the data into Spice. So we'll see that it'll start to import my data here. While that's running, just a quick overview of what this UI is. So here I have all my fields from my data set. I have my various visual types that I can use, areas for filters and parameters and setting actions between them. Skinning the dashboards via themes, my ML Insights. So the easiest way to build visuals in QuickSight is just to leave it on autograph and start clicking on fields I'm interested in. So for instance, I want to look at my total sales, and if I just click on one number, I'll get a KPI value. But say I add a date field into this, for instance, now it's going to break this up into a line chart instead. Now this is at a daily level, but perhaps I want to aggregate this a little bit and roll it up to a monthly level. I could really easily add forecasting to this with a couple clicks. So here it's now showing my projected values out. Let's add another visual here, and maybe I just want to do something like a month over month or a year over year. So here I can choose a KPI visual type, and right now it's defaulting to day over day, but if I just change this to monthly or quarterly or yearly level, it'll change this to whatever period over period that I chose. So just generally, you can see that it's all drag and drop interface. There's really never any coding or scripting that happens in QuickSight from a dashboard authoring perspective. Excuse me. Um, Now, we've only built a couple of visualizations so far, but QuickSight's already running a bunch of algorithms and computations on my data, behind the scenes. So by clicking on this Insights menu, I can see some of the things that QuickSight thinks are interesting to me. So these are called suggested insights. So for instance, this month-over-month change, maybe this is something that my users would be interested in seeing all the time. So I could add that into the dashboard. And maybe also, here it found an anomaly in my line chart, or maybe the forecast. I want to put that forecast in here as well. So these are just additional visual types, just like any of the other visual types that you can add. And what I mean by that is that they behave, from a filtering perspective, just the same way. So if we were to just go add a quick filter here for, let's go with segment, and add this into our sheet. Say, let's apply it to all the visuals. I can pop this up on the top. So as I change different segments here, notice that everything in the dashboard is updating, including my forecasted numbers, my period over period, and the visuals. So maybe one last thing here. Let's go add one more visual and just build out kind of a raw table that we can drill down to. So here I'll tell QuickSight I want to build a table. I'll add all the order level information like the date, the customer, the actual identifier, city, state, throw some numbers in there. So just clicking on all the different fields that I want to include. And then to set up drill downs from one of the visuals to another, it's as simple as coming to this actions menu, and I can tell QuickSight to filter all the visuals on this sheet by this particular visual. So if I set that up here on my time trend, now as I select one of the values here, my forecast is not going to have enough data to, my insights won't have enough data when I click on one of these, but I will filter my table down below to just the month that I had selected. So in this case, September. So you can see all my transactions are now just from September. All right, so we won't go through all the visual types and all the authoring experience, but hopefully this gives you a feel for just how easy it is to create these. Now, kind of to wrap up this part, once I'm happy with what I have, I would choose to share this. So I would publish a dashboard. And let's call this our sales overview, just as an example. I have some advanced publishing options that I can use if I'd like, but I'll just kind of keep the defaults for now. And then the last thing is, who do I want to share this with? So I can either share this with individuals or with groups. So if I start typing the name of a group, I'll start to see any groups that match that here. Or I could share with individuals and groups. So that's sharing this individual object. One last thing that I'll point out is that the folders are actually a really great way to manage this at scale. So if I come here to my folders, I've created some of these already, and you can have a subfolder structure to them. So for instance, within sales, I have a geo breakdown, and then within Americas, within the US, I can keep content, keep my dashboards and my other assets within these folders, and then at the folder level, manage the permissions. So here, if I click on my share button for this folder, I can see the existing permissions that I had already set up here. So then anything that I publish into that folder will inherit those same permissions. So I highly recommend this for not only organizing the content, but just managing permissions at scale. All right, so that completes our demo. Let's jump back over to the rest of the presentation. So users at scale. So as I mentioned, QuickSight is a serverless architecture. It's fully managed by AWS. And that's very different from if you were to have to manage your own servers and deploy this. So particularly whether you have more concurrency or adding more complexity to your dashboards, or trying to deploy globally and expand to new regions, add high availability, right? These are all situations where you're going to have to add nodes to your clusters. And also, there's management considerations around that. Whereas with QuickSight, the session-based pricing that we have is truly all in. So we automatically scale the system on your behalf. You can deploy to new regions within seconds. All the HA is built in. So when you're computing a TCO, really our session price is fully comprehensive versus you have to kind of take all those others into consideration with a server-based architecture. And this is kind of a quick illustration of that. So as I need to scale out, either for more users or more concurrency, a traditional BI, I'm looking at adding servers to be able to support those additional users. Whereas with QuickSight, we are automatically adding that capacity in the background to support, not only more data, but additional users as well. Again, this all happens automatically behind the scenes. So around governance, I mentioned this briefly in the demo, but QuickSight does integrate with any SAML-based single sign-on provider or OpenID Connect as well. If you're using third parties like Okta or Ping or ADFS, those are really common for our customers to integrate with systems like that. Or if you want to integrate with either your on-premises Active Directory or your cloud-based Active Directory, QuickSight natively integrates with those as well, and we'll be able to sync any kind of groups and users within those groups. So it works for the authentication to get them in, but also you can use those groups for authorization of who gets to see what within QuickSight. Here's an illustration of kind of the folder structure that I showed you in the demo and how their permissions can map to this. So each one of these represents a group. I have different groups for admin, groups of admin users, author users, and reader users. And you can see how we can set that up, at really granular levels, or I could say, maybe my executives get to see everything underneath this. So there is inheritance among the folders. So notice that the executives can see everything at this top level, which means they get to see everything at the leaf levels as well. Whereas if I add just within the EMEA sales org, the EMEA sales team as viewers, then that's the only folder they would have access to. Right, so this has all the flexibility that you would need to manage this at very high scale. And as we talk about data security, so once I get to a dashboard, I may need to show different users different sets of data, and that's where row level security comes in. So this is where I can apply a set of rules and say, it can be hierarchical. So say VPs can see all the data across the org, whereas individuals will only be able to see their own data. Managers can see their data and their direct reports. This is really flexible in terms of how you can set these rules up. So how does QuickSight work with other AWS sources? So on this slide, we see essentially all the connectors that we saw when I was showing you in the demo. So whether your data is in the cloud or on premises, or you want to bring in data from other third-party SaaS providers, we can connect your data basically wherever it is. And as I mentioned, when we connect to these sources, you can choose to import the data into Spice and schedule that to refresh, or we can maintain real-time direct connectivity to the sources as well. So how we connect to data inside your VPC as well as on premises, this is kind of the architecture behind that. So in the admin console for QuickSight, I would say manage my VPC connections. And when you create one of those, we'll automatically deploy this ENI, this Elastic Network Interface on your behalf. So this allows us to communicate between between QuickSight, which is in an AWS managed VPC, and anything inside your VPC. So for instance, your Redshift or your RDS or Aurora, or maybe you're just running your own database engine on your own EC2 instance. But then if you have connectivity between your on-premise network and your VPC, either using Direct Connect or a proxy or VPN, this will also give you private connectivity to your on-premises sources. Extremely common for our customers to analyze their data in their data lake using QuickSight. So this example here is end to end is fully serverless. So you'd never have to stand up a single instance, and you could get started with this in literally minutes. Not every part of this is a required component. This is just kind of showing you some options. So, I may have my data in S3. I would use Glue to crawl and discover the data that's in S3 and populate the data catalog, which would now kind of make it look like a relational database, kind of a virtual set of metadata on top of that data in S3. And then I optionally can secure that via lake formation, which is the central way to manage all the permissions around the data in S3. And then I could query that either through Athena or using EMR or using a feature of Redshift called Redshift Spectrum, which allows you to query data all the way back in S3 and combine it with data that's in Redshift. And then visualize that through QuickSight. So again, a fully serverless pipeline for analyzing anything in your data lake. A very recent use case that we now support is real-time analytics. So we just added our Elasticsearch service and our TimeStream connectors. TimeStream being a brand new database that AWS launched at the beginning of October. So both of these, whether using log data or just generally time series data that's maybe coming from IoT devices, when you hook QuickSight up to these sources, we have the ability to auto refresh those dashboards on a particular interval. So you can go down to every 60 seconds if you'd like, or you could say, refresh this every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So without even touching anything on my screen, my data will continually update. All right, and then the last topic of the day is around pricing. So we launched an additional pricing model within the last month. So just to kind of recap, or just the differences between these. So we've always had this reader-based, I should say user-based model for our readers. So there is a difference between the reader users and the author users. So readers, they are session-based. So the minimum for a reader is 0. If they did not log in that month, you pay nothing for them. And then as they use QuickSight, we measure it on a session basis. So that costs 30 cents per session, up to a max of $5. So consider that unlimited usage for that user for the month. And that user will be capped at $5. You don't need to choose who is a $5 user and who is usage-based. We'll automatically apply that cap. But for use cases in the many thousands of users, or if you have requirements around maybe anonymous access, like maybe you don't want to manage any users in QuickSight. You want to either put this out publicly or you want to deploy something internally, and then we can restrict the access by IP address, so only your employees can access it. But for generally large-scale use cases or any anonymous use cases, we've recently introduced our capacity pricing. So in this, you essentially get a bundle of sessions to be used over the course of 12 months. And in exchange for committing to a certain amount of sessions in that time period, you get discounted session prices. So the first tier is at 200,000 sessions. And that would, so you get a discount on the total amount for that. This does have a discounted session rate in it. We're just saying the overage, if you go past the 200,000, in this case would be back to 30 cents. But at these other tiers, anything that goes over that amount, that tier, is at a discounted rate as well. So it also works really good if you have kind of seasonal access patterns. So maybe you're in the education industry and you don't have a lot of usage over the summer. I'm not going to have nearly as much as I would in the fall and the spring. So this accounts for that as well. Right? I could use more sessions in certain months, use less in others. We're measuring it on an annual basis. So the whole reason we came up with this model was based on our customers' feedback. So we'd been hearing from customers that they'd like a way to purchase in bulk. They'd like a way to deploy things anonymously and not have to manage users. So when using capacity pricing, I could just hard code a single user into something and deploy it that way. So that's really where we came up with this model, and we're really excited to finally have it available. So if you're interested in exploring this, you can always get started with the user-based model and change to capacity pricing. But in any case, if you're interested in this, please contact us. You can find this on our website as well. So I realize you won't be able to click the contact us link here, but if you just go search QuickSight pricing, you'll find a similar page to this and a link to contact us. And to wrap up here, well, let's take a look at a couple of customers who have deployed QuickSight at really large scales. So our first one is Capital One. So Capital One has tens of thousands of users accessing QuickSight today. And they hook QuickSight up to not only their data lake, but also systems like Snowflake and Redshift and RDS and others. But they open this up truly as a self-service platform. So they give each business group author capabilities and ability to share with readers in their group. They embed it into dozens of internal facing applications as well, and cover use cases everywhere from fraud analytics, market research, IT type reporting on operational efficiency and monitoring and things along those lines. So truly all aspects of the business. And another one being the Best Western International Hotel Group. So they also have deployed QuickSight to more than 20,000 of their users. So their primary use case is to get reporting out to the revenue managers for each of the hotel locations. So these users are spread across the world. They're getting a mix of daily and weekly operational reports just on the goings on in each of the locations. They were previously using Cognos and Oracle on premises, and they've migrated both of those to Redshift and QuickSight. You can see some stats around just the amount of time they save by not having to maintain each of these or perform any upgrades. So a huge amount of time savings for them, which translates into more value add that they can bring to the business from the IT perspective. And then one other use case that I don't have a slide for necessarily, but wanted to call out is internally at Amazon. So we have rolled QuickSight out to hundreds of thousands of users, all on a single QuickSight account. So just kind of a proof point of the scale of how many users you can add, how much data. We have users that are analyzing many thousands of data sets that each contain many millions of rows of data, scheduling those on all different kind of bases. And our internal IT organization has to manage nothing about the infrastructure to be able to support that. So just another example of at really high scale, even internally at Amazon, how we use QuickSight. All right, so with that, that'll complete the presentation. We've saved some time here for Q&A. So if you have any questions, happy to take those now. So thanks, everybody.